Hi, welcome to Book Club, and tonight we're starting with an Australian novel recommended to me by one of our recent guests, and now in the fine book club tradition, from me to you. It's about a sort of modern-day circus, except the stars of the show are humans who've been either surgically or genetically reconstructed and in the process become white-hot celebrities. The Wonders is the title of Paddy O'Reilly's intriguing third novel, while our classic, one of my all-time favourites, is Mark Haddon's The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, a most unusual murder mystery which takes in a dog corpse, a teenage investigator and a family in crisis. So stay with us. Kicking off with a warm shout-out to my friends, Marieke Hardy and Jason Steger. Please welcome them. Now, our first guest tonight is what you'd call a colourful character. Born in Northern Ireland, studied philosophy at Oxford and lived in Harlem for 7 years before becoming a gun crime writer. In fact, just last month, he walked away with Australia's primo prize for crime writing, the 2014 Ned Kelly Award, for his novel In the Morning I'll Be Gone, third in the series featuring Detective Sean Duffy, permanent Australian resident and I think soon-to-be citizen, Adrian McKinty. Is that right? You're going to...
I've just become an Australian citizen.
Yay! Taking me over. You can never leave now. And she is back, the ever theatrical, ever desirable and all-round fabulous Virginia Gay, often seen starring on a rival network's winning series, though tonight we are the winners as she is ours. Huzzah! Would you please welcome them both? So, to our new release tonight, The Wonders, which opens with the death and resuscitation of one of its main characters. Science and technology, it seems, can do almost anything, though can they change human nature?
Leon is the clockwork man. His life depends on his fragile metal heart. Gene therapy has left Catherine's body as woolly as a lamb, and Christos has chosen to be implanted with wings for the sake of his art. Together, they are the Wonders, almost superhuman. But are they medical marvels or just freaks in a cyber sideshow?
So that's the kind of the premise, is these three transformed humans, one transformed by design, one by accident and one basically to save his life. I think that's a pretty good premise.
It is. It's a very good premise. I thought was very intrigued by it. I enjoyed the book. I ended up being a bit disappointed with it, though, probably because I wanted more. We see a lot of one character, Leon, and I wanted more of one of the other characters, particularly Catherine, who is the one who is covered in black wool. I mean, she's the most intriguing character, I think, of them all. And I was yearning for her.
This is like one of my favourite genres. Circus books, stories that are set in a sort of in-between time but reference that Victorian obsession with curiosity and what makes us freaks. Are we all freaks? What happens when the limelight transforms us, and how does a circus world, the gypsy life of the circus world, interact? So I had very high hopes for this book, and I think because it's in a category that I dearly love, I kept comparing it to some of my favourite books of all time. Like Angela Carter's The Knights of the Circus. It's almost so similar as to be unfair to The Wonders, because I think this is one of the greatest books of the last 100 years. And Wonders touches us on some very similar topics and almost some similar characters, and doesn't, for me, live up to Angela's.
But I think people who can't or would rather not read Angela Carter for whatever reason
might really enjoy
it. And I think that it's a very approachable book.
Very easy to read. Yeah, absolutely.
What did you think, Adrian?
I didn't pick up on the circus concept. I liked it more as a fantasy novel. And I thought it fell squarely within sort of the modern fantasy genre. And she references Wizard of Oz at the beginning of the book, and I think it's very much in that tradition. And it reminded me a little bit of the China Miéville novel, Perdido Street Station. And he wrote this fantasy novel, which is very similar thematically. about this character who has lost his wings and wants to rebuild mechanical wings, which reminded me of Christos in the
Except
book.
he really is the least likeable character in the book, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Well, it's only because he's aloof and he's serious about his art.
And he's awfully artistic.
Yeah,
awfully
I
artistic.
quite enjoyed that. I quite enjoyed him. And he was so serious and so aloof and so grumpy.
Yeah.
I quite like those characters. I did like the idea of these freaks, these outsiders, a bit like the Todd Browning film Freaks, and I enjoyed her delving into that world.
Marique.
This is a terrible book. It's a terrible, badly written book. I'm amazed to hear anyone be kind about it, but I know this is the nature of the show. And she's a Melbourne writer, and it's always, I'm sure I'm going to bump into her and she'll punch me in the face, and that's fair enough. And it's horrible. I've had lots of bad reviews and they feel terrible, but I can't sit here and in good conscience lie about it. I just thought it was an amazing mix of overconfidence and underconfidence as a writer. Overconfidence is that I think she could see the worlds and the characters very clearly in her head, and I don't think they translated. So I finished the book and I still didn't feel I had a clear picture of what the heart looked like, what the sheep woman really looked like. I didn't get a sense of the house. I didn't get a sense of the American character. I sensed that the writer knew what they looked like, but I didn't think she successfully told me what they looked like. And then an underconfidence in that she was so heavy-handed with her metaphors. They're living in a place and there's abandoned circus animals because we're all circus animals because there's circus animals there like we are because we're circus. I just thought, give your reader a bit of faith. I'm starting to dribble. I'm so angry.
Well, I reckon you've got very high standard of writing.
Yes, I do.
And I don't think it actually is it's a high concept, but it's not highly written. I mean, the writing didn't trouble me. Yeah, I thought it was fine for the job.
Oh,
Marique's
horrible
right to a
thing
certain.
to say. It'll do. It's fine.
I would say that you're right to a certain. I think she does sort of labour certain points, like when obviously with a hero who's got a brass heart, there's going to be stuff. And I got after the third mention of not feeling things in the heart anymore. I thought, no, come on, we've had enough of that. And there's another.
I think you're all being so clever.
No, it's not a question. No, certainly not. It's just when something's being hammered home a bit, I think it gets a bit much.
Well, listen, in terms of the metaphor, they're sitting on a couch. The suite had been brand new when they arrived. Over their time together, the chafing of people sitting and moving about had rubbed away the plush brown velvet pile, and now he could see the cords under the upholstery material showing through like the tendons in a stressed neck. Everything was wearing thin. The furniture, the shows, the lifestyle, their relationships. Really, I didn't get that's what you meant by the metaphor of the thin, threadbare couch. Well, thank you for explaining it to me.
Well, I just think sometimes it's good to have something underlined so you get the point.
Do you want the colouring in as well? I mean, for God's sake.
I think you're attacking it because you think it's a book of a different genre. I think you think it's a satire. And if it's a satire, it has to be funnier, it has to be wittier, it has to be sharper.
I just expect it to be well written and good story. It was bad. It was badly plotted story.
No, I think in terms of it being a fable or a fantasy novel, I think it works completely well. I think the ideas are solid. The prose doesn't have to be fancy. You can underline metaphors in a fantasy novel or in
But what about the characters that have to be believable in some way? There's sexy sheep who keeps flashing her breasts. There's a doctor who falls in love with someone for no
like
reason.
Lady Lamb. I don't know what your problem
Why do
is.
the characters have to be
problems.
believable? Why do they have to be believable? It's a fantasy world.
Because
they just have to be interesting.
It's not sci-fi.
They don't have to be believable.
It's a parallel universe, and it doesn't have to follow the kind of normal rules. And that's why I think the China Miable is probably a better comparison for me than the Wonderful Angela.
Well, I think I agree. I think I thought it was a satire. I think you could read it as a satire, and as a satire, it's not as sharp as you'd like it to be. Because the questions that it brings up about celebrity too, and about how we manufacture and consume celebrity, I think they're all thoughts that we have had. I think they're thoughts that any intelligent person watching any one of the many celebrity machine shows that are on television at the moment that are about making a product, showing it off and then churning it up. I think we've had these thoughts, and I think actually the stuff that's going on around that kind of celebrity culture at the moment, which is that people, once they win these shows, are not selling and they are disappearing into nothingness again. Like, that's a more interesting idea about how do we make freaks and then what do we do when we leave.
I thought that's what she was trying to do. That she was trying to bring that up as a discussion point as well.
I don't know why you're saying she's trying to do it. She does do it. Would you accept that she was going for some bigger points about, I mean, the nature of humanity, or humans, not humanity, humans, the ability we have increasingly to change ourselves, what we become.
But ideas get lost.
And I like that.
If you're not gripped by a story or character, ideas get lost, and you don't want to give them the time to contemplate them. And I think the problem was, and maybe it's you saying you had a yearning for the character who was very colourful and interesting, had an interesting background, who apparently overcame her background by banging on a wall. But our lead character, our protagonist, is this insipid kind of guy. The most interesting thing about him is that he has a heart. He has a brass heart.
I thought
the heart is fascinating, but him as a character, it just kept saying, I was never very good with girls, all I was interested in research. It gets lost. He was just this beige character.
Well, I like the fact that Leon was beige. I like the fact that he was a boring character. And I thought, because he's boring, that's what most of us are. Most of us are quite boring beige characters. Well, I speak for myself. But anyway, and I liked that when he went into this world, this bizarre world. If he'd been a big, boisterous character going into this world, I think he would have coped with it.
He doesn't have to be big and boisterous to be interesting.
I mean, he was
Patrick Bateman was a very quiet character, not big and boring. I mean, still waters run deep. He doesn't have to be boring.
But I liked him. I liked the fact that you'd taken this kid from country Victoria and taken him into this bizarre world of circus and freaks. I think that was a good authorial choice.
But how did he develop? How did his story arc develop?
He's
The
one person who, well,
apart from the fact that he started kind of enjoying fame.
No.
But how personally did he develop? Even when he
grew
married
emotionally.
He grew emotionally.
I mean, he still
Did
sort
you
of
read the
ricochets
ending?
around his wife. Yes, of course I read the ending.
That Leon is the ending. That is the ending of him finding his real heart.
But the thing that's interesting about Angela Carter is that if Angela Carter had written this book, there would be a lot more there would be a lot more sex, and it would be a lot less chaste. And that's one thing. It's slightly it was a bit very chaste, very sort of safe in that aspect of it. I thought, are we going to see some interesting interspecies?
Well, that's what I wondered. I must
and
admit.
it never happened.
I mean, the first time we met Lady Lamb, I thought, well, this could be interesting. And apart from anything else, she didn't like being touched, did she?
Right.
Yeah, but she liked to flash.
Yeah,
she did.
And I just thought, oh, well, you know.
Angela Carter would have gone there.
So,
Yes,
totally.
Did you feel a bit voyeuristic?
Yeah. I mean, and that's a deliberate thing, isn't it? She's clearly setting up the reader to be like somebody in a circus or whatever, watching the Todd Browning film, which is an extraordinary film, isn't it? And this sort of, you do occasionally feel a little bit sort of uncomfortable, or should I be reading this, and why am I reacting like that? And maybe you didn't, but and yeah, I mean that's quite a good aspect of it.
So it's interesting that when we talk about what it's about, everyone's had different. Is it about celebrity? Is it about a comment on losing things? Is it about, I think that's part of its problem, is that she doesn't have a clear idea at the start of it of what it is about or what you are supposed to feel. It is a lot of ideas, too many, I think, too many thinly explained.
As you can see, room for lots of views. Very interesting book, Paddy O'Reilly's The Wonders. Time now to look at what else we've been reading over this past month. We'll start with you, Adrian.
I've been reading Longbourn by Joe Baker, and it's Pride and Prejudice told from the perspective of the servants. And I've just been absolutely loving it. I know if I'd been writing this book, it would have been some insane Marxist screed against the upper classes. But she's a much better writer than I am, and a much more subtle writer, and it's absolutely brilliant.
I've been reading Justin Hazelwood's wonderful, generous, fun-employed Life as an Artist in Australia. He performs as the bedroom philosopher, and he said he's written the book that he would have loved to have read at 23. So it's about how artists can realistically make it, all the things he's done right, all the things done wrong. It's just a wonderful, sad, beautiful, interesting memoir, and anyone that's working in music or art in Australia should definitely read it.
It's called
Fun Employed.
Fun Employed.
And you said it's got like even accounting tips in there
yes,
too.
yeah, he talks about how to get your accounts done, and here you go.
Come on.
Andy. An Astronaut's Guide to Life by Chris Hadfield. He was 9 years old, a Canadian farm boy, when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon. He resolved that day he would become an astronaut. He, for 5 months, was the boss of the space station up there. He's the man who sang Space Oddity, David Bowie's Space Oddity, in zero gravity, and had 200 million plus hits around the world. He is extraordinary.
I read Fable Parrot's second novel, When the Night Comes, and about brother and sister in Hobart. Their family's been in a crisis, and an obsession with this ship, the Nella Dan, which
The red Nella Dan.
which ploughed the down to the Antarctic.
I read The Lost Books of the Odyssey by Zachary Mason. It is a perfect, whatever it is, 120 pages. I was going to say novel, but it's not a novel. It's a series of fragments of stories, retellings of the Odysseus myth in the most exquisite language. I get a bit shaky talking about it because I love it so much. It's wonderful, and I have already bought 3 copies to give to other people. Like, I just can't recommend it enough.
And all those book titles will be up on the website later. Now, our classic tonight is The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime, published some 10 years ago. One of those great successes which sold millions of copies. I've chosen it because I love it, first of all, and also it's a good fit with the ABC's Mental As Week. Its hero and narrator is a teenager. His name's Christopher Byrne. And this was one of the first popular novels to take us inside the mind of someone on the autism spectrum. We see the world through his eyes, and that's a strange but also a kind of marvellous place to be.
Christopher is a very unusual boy. He's great at maths and games, but he can't read faces. He doesn't like being touched, and he takes everything literally. Then, one night, he finds the dog next door, dead in the neighbour's garden. His dad warns him to stay out of other people's business. But Christopher is a young detective, determined to investigate the mystery of the dead dog.
OK, so quickly, I read it when it was first published, Asperger's syndrome, as it was then known. It only made the famous DSM, which is the Manual of Mental Disorders, 10 years earlier. So this was a very new idea and a new book. It always puts me on an emotional roller coaster because you've got this teenager writing sort of jauntily about what he can and can't do, not read faces, but, you know, he can multiply 2 to the power of 25 in his head. He doesn't, however, begin to understand the deep pain his parents are going through, and somehow the pain and the laughter and the joy and the sadness all merge together into what I think is a brilliant book.
I agree. It's perfect. It's very hard. I find it a very hard book to discuss because it is note perfect. It's very sad. It's very beautiful. I mean, it's beautiful and full of hope. It's very funny in parts, but at the end, I mean, I think there's a real clanging echo of sadness for this family and their future. It's not a feel-good book necessarily, even though there's a lot of warmth and colour to it, but it describes the way we feel and how we feel it, and it does put you inside the head of that character. So if you ever want an empathetic worldview, it's so brilliantly done.
I agree. It's a terrific book. I don't think it has a sad ending at all. I think it has a happy ending. He gets his A-level maths, he gets his further maths, he gets his physics, and I think he becomes Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. I think he has a good life, and you know, he's fairly low on the autism spectrum, and I think he has a pretty happy life, at least for himself. I don't know what happens to his parents, but yeah, I think it's an almost perfect book. I think the third act is a little bit loose, and there's really not much going on there.
We'll come back. We'll come back to that. Yes.
Loved it. Absolutely loved it. I agree with everything. Everybody said that there's this extraordinary voice that it's so gloriously immersive. I mean, I find that my highest praise of any book, which is hilariously self-serving, is when I start to write like the book I'm reading. And so I was writing these messages to my boyfriend that were just all one long sentence with several clauses and not a lot of punctuation. and this and then, and this and then that, and then we'll do this, and then we'll go and do that, and then we'll probably have dinner and sleep early. Full stop. He was like, what are you doing?
What are you reading?
Yeah, totally.
So you find the voice really charming?
Oh, my God, it's so wonderful. And we're talking about, you know, if Paddy O'Reilly's thing is actually, like, about a man who can't feel, this is the story. This is such a perfect version of that, because you absolutely understand his worldview.
And that's because he says in the course of the book, that he cannot tell a lie. So Christopher is a sort of ultimate reliable narrator. But
he's an unthinking narrator.
Well, he's an unthinking. So we're as the reader, we're ahead of him because we know what's going on before he knows what's going on. And the great thing about it is that you see him discovering all these things. I think it is an optimistic book in that he develops hugely in the course of this book. Because he has to go on a journey, he has to discover things, he has to detect, he has to do chatting.
I love doing chatting.
There's even an occasion when he has to wear yellow shorts. Now he loathes yellow, and 4 yellow cars in a row
super bad day.
Is a super bad. God, if he lived in Melbourne where the taxis are yellow, when I was going to the airport, I saw about 8 taxis in a row, and I thought, oh no, the plane's going to crash.
What I love so much about this is that we talk about this as a detective story, and he does his detecting, but actually it stops being a detective story very early on, and it's a great classic journey quest of the hero going to try and do a thing and overcoming obstacles. And I think I'm interested by your point about the third act. Is this when he's on the journey or when he gets
after the train stuff is so exciting.
Oh my God,
I was on the edge of
tense.
I read it when it first came out, and I read it again last week, and I was on the edge of my seat because I was trying to get a ticket on the tube about 2 weeks ago in London, and I had the same thing, this massive machine, and I thought, well, do I want a day pass? Which zone do I want? I was so confused, and there's like 50 people behind you, all trying to pressure you, and I thought, what it must have been like for poor Christopher. You know, I was really panicking.
He said what he did, though, doesn't he? He sort of spends ages watching, because he notices everything, doesn't he? That's why Sherlock Holmes is his hero, because Sherlock Holmes watches and sees everything. And Christopher says nobody notices things. So when his idea...
Everyone's lazy.
Everyone's lazy. He'll say, they'll say, oh, well, there's a cow in the field or something, or there's this. And he'll say, actually, there's 31 houses and the spire of the village and of the church in the village and this and that.
That is kind of sweet. That is one of my very, very favourite bits, because he says that if people go, they say there's grass, there's cows, it's sunny with a few clouds, there's the village in the distance. He said for him, there are 19 cows in the field, 15 of which are black and white and 4 of which are brown and white. There are ridges in the field, which means that in medieval time, it's what they call a ridge in a furrow field, and blah, blah, blah. And you realise, as he said, I get so tired. And I think that's part of... Because he doesn't ever tell you, I feel tired.
Yeah.
He tells you all the things he did and that this is the effect it had on them, because he would never express an emotion.
It reminded me a little bit in terms of a child character narrating the breakdown of a marriage, or Adrian Mole, in terms of Adrian Mole's observations about his parents and their affairs and their divorce.
And he does it through this wonderful myopic view, and you have to do the work and go, shit, I don't think it's good between those parents.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah.
Well, we should explain. There are 2 cases. One is the case of the dead dog who belongs to the neighbour and has been killed with a garden fork through its belly. So this is not and this is the thing, it doesn't shirk unpleasantness too.
No.
And we work out pretty quickly, I think, who did it. But he solves it. It also is the case of the missing mother. And he also solves that mystery too, because his mother is an absent figure. Well, I don't want to give it away, but it's.
But he solves that inadvertently.
He does solve that inadvertently.
To be fair.
And he solves it, and that's, I think, whereas where I agree with you, it breaks through this kind of affectlessness, as they call it, when you don't register emotion. And when he finds those letters that his mother has written him, which have been hidden from him, and he says, it's like a computer, everything goes fut, and I had to close down.
Control, Alt, Delete.
Control. And I think it's those really simple descriptions that give you a sense of, it's not that he doesn't suffer or feel, it's just...
He gets overwhelmed.
He can't, and he doesn't.
I also I love how much and the kind of work that the book asks us to do, and you touched on it with the Adrian Mole stuff. So we get this scene as described through this one tiny pinhole of this beautiful kid's mind, and we have to do the work that goes... So there's this wonderful bit at the end of a chapter that is, he goes and stands outside the shed in the middle of the night by the moonlight, the shed where the garden tools are, stands and stares at the shed. And the woman comes out and says, what are you doing in my garden? And he says, I'm looking at the shed, the tools in the shed, and she says, get out or I'll call the police. And it's only, and that's the end of the chapter, that's all you hear of it. And it's only as you turn the page you go, that would be terrifying. That would be absolutely terrifying to see a troubled kid standing in the backyard staring at your tools.
Yes.
You know, you just you paint around
Your
the
dog
picture,
having recently been speared
killed
with
by
one.
a tool.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, you constantly you see through this little world, and then you're asked to paint around it. You're offered the opportunity to put those pieces together in a way that he can't, and it's just I love it.
My flaw, reading it the second time, that I didn't like, or I wasn't completely convinced by, was these adult relationships. I mean, yes, Christopher is narrating the story, but Mark Haddon wrote the book. And Mark Haddon hasn't been I don't think that they're completely convincing. Also, Mark Haddon, he's very posh. I mean, he went to this very, very posh English public school. And when he's writing the working class characters, I think that shows a little bit. There's all these awful spelling mistakes in the letters that the mother writes.
But it's meant to be. And you're saying it's very patronising.
I think it's very patronising.
I can't spell, and as somebody, I felt so represented when I read those letters. I was like, yeah, where do you put the I in patience? I don't even...
But there's so many of them, and I think there's part of this. That's the way the posh people of this certain ilk, that's the way they see the lower orders. Yes. They say, oh God, they can't spell, they're always fighting, they're always boozing. There's a little bit of a chav quality to that relationship.
That's interesting, I hadn't thought of that. So there we are, the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime, as good as it ever was, with some quibbles about the third act. That is our club for another month. Big thank yous to tonight's book clubbers, to Adrian, to Marique, to Jason and to Virginia. Thank you. Before we get to next month's club, a reminder for you to jump online and vote for your favourite classic beach book. Those sand and sunscreen-encrusted books you associate with the good times, even if they weren't technically good books. You probably know the type of thing I'm talking about. I'll give you a personal tip. My nomination begins with Valley, ends with Doles. Misspent Youth, perfect book. Check out the list on our website and feel free to add your own. Free and shameless. You've got till our next book club to vote, and we will reveal the top 10 in early December. And on that last book club of the year, which is November the 4th, we will be talking about the new novel by literary superstar Haruki Murakami. Now, people queued up at the bookshops. It sold more than 1 million copies the first week it went on sale in Japan, and we will be finding what all the fuss is about. Its title is Colourless Tsukuru Tazaki and His Years of Pilgrimage. Join us for that. Until then, happy reading. Thank you so much for your company, and a very good night.
If this program has raised personal concerns, you may wish to contact one of these counselling services for further information or advice.